Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story comes from Martin, a 41-year-old software developer from Amsterdam, who thought he'd found freedom in Hanoi. He escaped the Dutch winter, the suffocating predictability of corporate life, the ghost of a failed marriage that haunted every canal sidewalk back home. Vietnam promised adventure, affordability, a chance to be someone new. 8 months in, he was living the dream on $1,200 a month, teaching English to bored teenagers, drinking bia hoi on plastic stools, feeling more alive than he had in a decade. Then, one rainy October morning, a taxi ran a red light on Iki Tam Street. What happened next didn't just break Martin's leg. It shattered 15 years of carefully saved money, exposed the brutal reality of medical emergencies abroad, and left him more trapped than he'd ever been in Amsterdam. This is the story of how paradise became a prison, and how a single accident can cost you everything you thought you'd built. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you've ever faced a medical emergency abroad, or if you're living overseas without insurance right now, share your story below. And if this resonates, hit that like and subscribe button. You never know when you might need to hear these warnings. Now, here's Martin's story, in his own words. I arrived in Hanoi on a February afternoon with 2 suitcases and 45,000 euros in a Dutch savings account I'd been building since I was 26. 15 years of 60-hour weeks at a tech firm in Amsterdam Zuid. 15 years of skipping vacations, driving a 10-year-old Volvo, living in a studio when I could have afforded something bigger. That money was my retirement fund, my safety net, my fuck you money. If the world ever got too heavy, I never thought I'd need it. I definitely never thought it would all disappear in 8 days. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when Vietnam still felt like the best decision I'd ever made. The divorce finalized in December. Saskia kept the apartment in Jordan, I kept the savings, and we both pretended we were relieved. Maybe she was. I just felt hollow. 40 years old, no kids, no property, nothing tying me to Amsterdam, except a job that made me want to walk into the IJ every Monday morning. My manager kept talking about exciting new initiatives and synergistic opportunities, and I kept nodding while planning my escape. I'd been teaching myself Vietnamese on Duolingo for 6 months. I got my TEFL certification online. And one Thursday in January, I told my boss I was done. He looked confused, like people didn't just quit stable 6-figure jobs to teach English in Southeast Asia. But I did. The first few months in Hanoi were everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd prepared for. I found a teaching job at a language center in Ba Dinh, nothing fancy, $1,200 a month cash. Back home, that's poverty wages. Here, it made me feel rich. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Tay Ho, the expat neighborhood on the edge of Westlake, for 800 euros a month. Too expensive by local standards. But it had a balcony overlooking the water, and I needed that. I needed to wake up to something beautiful. I bought a used Honda Wave motorbike for $300 and learned to navigate Hanoi traffic like everyone else, by accepting that road rules were suggestions and death was a statistical possibility you just didn't think about. The teaching was easy. Bored teenagers whose parents paid for English lessons they didn't want. I'd show up, run through grammar exercises, answer questions about America even though I was Dutch, and collect my cash at the end of the month. No taxes, no bureaucracy, no performance reviews. The language center didn't care if I had insurance. They didn't care about much except that I showed up sober and on time. I had my work permit, my temporary residence card, and the blissful anonymity of being a foreigner in a city of 8 million people who didn't know my story and didn't ask. I fell into a rhythm. Mornings teaching at the center, afternoons at Bia Hoi corners drinking 30-cent beer with other expats and local guys who wanted to practice English. Evenings on my balcony watching the sunset over Westlake, cooking simple meals, reading books I'd been meaning to read for years. I dated a Vietnamese woman I met at a coffee shop, nothing serious, just someone to explore the city with on weekends. She took me to places tourists never saw. We rode out to Bat Trang to watch ceramic artisans, ate bun cha in family-run shops with no English menus, wandered through the old quarter at night when the streets turned into a maze of scooters and street food and neon. For the first time since the divorce, maybe the first time in my adult life, I felt light. The savings sat in my Dutch account untouched. 45,000 euros earning minimal interest, but always there, always waiting. I'd log into the banking app once a week just to see the number. It was my proof that I wasn't lost, that I hadn't thrown my life away. If Vietnam didn't work out, If I got homesick or bored or disillusioned, I had options. The money was a safety net. And safety nets, I assumed, were only necessary if you fell. October came with rain. Not the all-day drizzle of Amsterdam, but sudden tropical downpours that turned the streets into rivers and then disappeared an hour later. The Vietnamese called it the monsoon season. I called it inconvenient. My motorbike had cheap tires and even cheaper brakes, and wet roads made every ride an exercise in faith. But you adapt. Everyone rides in the rain. You just go slower, keep your distance, and hope the person next to you is doing the same. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays I taught 3 classes back-to-back starting at 9 in the morning. I woke up at 7:30 to gray skies and the sound of rain hammering my balcony. I made instant coffee, ate some banh mi left over from the night before, and checked my phone. Nothing important. A message from my sister in Utrecht asking how I was. I didn't reply. She'd been skeptical of the whole Vietnam thing from the start. Kept asking when I was coming back to real life. I put on jeans, a raincoat I'd bought at a market stall for $5, and my helmet. The helmet was cheap too. More decoration than protection. But it was the law, and I wasn't trying to get stopped by traffic police. The ride from Tay Ho to Ba Dinh takes about 25 minutes if traffic cooperates. That morning the streets were slick and crowded with scooters weaving through puddles. I took my usual route down Niki Tam Street, a narrow road that curves along the lake before cutting inland toward the city center. I'd ridden it 100 times. I knew every pothole, every intersection, every place where taxis like to pull illegal U-turns. But knowing doesn't protect you. I was halfway down Ny Tom, doing maybe 30 kilometers per hour, when the taxi came out of nowhere. He'd been parked on the side of the road and decided to make a left turn, without signaling, without checking, without any indication he knew I existed. I saw him move, and I hit the brakes, but the road was wet, and my tires were shit, and physics doesn't negotiate. I remember yelling something, maybe in Dutch, maybe just a noise. The front of my bike slammed into his rear quarter panel. The impact threw me forward. I felt the handlebars twist, felt my body leave the seat, felt gravity take over. I hit the pavement hard, left side first. My leg bent wrong. My ribs compressed. The world became pain, and the sound of metal scraping asphalt and rain hitting my helmet. I don't know how long I lay there. Could have been 10 seconds. Could have been 2 minutes. Time stopped meaning anything. There was just pain, white hot and absolute, radiating from my left leg and my ribs, and everywhere the road had torn through my jeans into skin. I couldn't move. I tried, and my body said no. People started gathering, voices in Vietnamese, some in English. An Hung Sao, Chung. Someone knelt beside me, an older Vietnamese woman in a raincoat. You need hospital, she said in English. Don't move. Ambulance coming. I tried to say I was okay, but the words came out as a groan. My phone was in my jacket pocket. The screen was shattered, but it still worked. I could see notifications lighting up the cracked glass. Missed call from the language center. Probably wondering where I was. The taxi driver got out of his car. Middle-aged guy, annoyed more than concerned. He looked at me, looked at his car, got back in, and drove away. Just like that. No exchange of information, no apology, no police report. Done. A few people yelled after him, but he didn't stop. I wanted to scream, to get up and chase him, to do something. But all I could do was lie there in the rain and feel my life breaking apart. The ambulance arrived maybe 10 minutes later. Not the government ambulance, I learned later, but a private one from Vinh Mec Hospital. They must have been called by someone in the crowd, or maybe they just patrol for accidents, I don't know. 2 paramedics loaded me onto a stretcher. Every movement sent lightning through my leg. I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste blood. They put me in the back of the ambulance. One of them, a young guy with decent English, asked if I had insurance. I said no. He didn't say anything, but his face changed. Just a flicker, like he'd already calculated what this was going to cost me. My passport was in my jacket pocket. I managed to tell him that. He pulled it out, checked my name, nodded. We go Vinh Mec, International Hospital. Very good. I didn't have the strength to argue. The ride to Vinh Mec Time City took maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every bump in the road was agony. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe through it. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like they taught in some yoga class I took once with Saskia, back when we were still pretending marriage was something we wanted. The technique didn't help. Pain is pain and breathing doesn't fix a broken leg. We arrived at Vinh Mec Time City International Hospital, And even through the fog of pain, I could tell it was a different world from the Vietnam I'd been living in. Modern, corporate, gleaming glass and polished floors and air conditioning cold enough to make me shiver. They wheeled me through automatic doors into an emergency room that looked like it belonged in Amsterdam, not Hanoi. A nurse took my passport at the reception desk. For registration, she said. I didn't think to ask when I'd get it back. They transferred me from the stretcher to a hospital bed in a curtained-off area. A doctor appeared, young, Vietnamese woman, maybe 30, with perfect English and an expression that managed to be both professional and completely detached. She examined my leg, pressed on my ribs, asked where it hurt. Everywhere, I wanted to say, but I just pointed. She ordered x-rays, a CT scan, blood work. Then came the question I'd been dreading. Do you have insurance, Mr. Vanderberg? No. Her face remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. I see. We will need a deposit before we can proceed with imaging and treatment. How much? 50 million dong. The number hit me like the taxi had. 50 million dong. I did the math in my head, converting through dollars because I couldn't think straight. Around 1,600 euros. For a deposit. Before treatment. Before knowing what was actually wrong, I felt my stomach drop. I don't have that in cash. We accept credit card. I pulled out my wallet with my good hand. My MasterCard, my link to that 45,000 euros sitting in Amsterdam. I handed it to the nurse. She swiped it. The machine beeped. Approved. Just like that, 1,620 euros gone. The nurse printed a receipt, gave me a copy, and wheeled me toward radiology. As they pushed me down the hallway, fluorescent lights passing overhead, I realized something that made my chest tighten even more than the broken ribs. This was just the beginning. The deposit was just to start. I had no idea what came next. No idea how much surgery would cost, or how long I'd be here, or what my life was going to look like when I finally left this place. If I left this place, they did the x-rays first. Positioning my leg sent me into a pain I didn't know existed. I heard myself make sounds I'd never made before. Animal noises, sounds of a body breaking. The technician was kind but efficient. Almost done, almost done. The CT scan was easier, just lying still while the machine hummed around me. Then back to the ER to wait for results. They gave me pain medication through an IV, something strong. The edges of the world went soft and blurry. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them, losing count, starting over. My phone buzzed in my jacket. I managed to pull it out. Message from the language center. Martin, where are you? You missed your classes. Please advise. I typed back with my thumb. Accident, hospital, can't come. They replied immediately. Oh no. Hope you're okay. Let us know when you can return. No, we'll hold your position, or take all the time you need. Just let us know. I understood what that meant. I was already being replaced. An hour later, maybe two, time had stopped meaning anything. The doctor came back with a tablet showing my scans. She pulled up the x-ray images. Even I could see the fracture, a clean line through my tibia. You have a fractured tibia, she said, pointing. Here, and 2 broken ribs, here and here. Severe road rash on your left side. You will need surgery to insert a rod and screws to stabilize the bone. You will also need to stay in the hospital for monitoring, at least 1 week. She swiped to another image. This is the recommended treatment plan. We can schedule surgery for Thursday, day after tomorrow. You will need to stay immobile until then. She handed me another printed sheet. An estimate. My eyes scanned down the list, struggling to focus through the medication haze. Surgery, 42 million dong. Hospital room per night, 8 million dong. Medications. Physical therapy consultations, miscellaneous fees. The total at the bottom, 186 million dong. I converted it in my head. 6,000 euros. Plus the 1,600 I'd already paid. 7,600 euros total, nearly a fifth of my entire savings, for one accident. One moment of bad timing on a wet road. This is just an estimate, the doctor added. Final costs may vary depending on complications or extended stay. I looked up at her. What if I can't pay? Her expression didn't change. We require payment before discharge. We accept credit card, bank transfer, or cash. And my passport? It is being held at reception as collateral. Standard hospital policy for foreign patients without insurance. You will receive it back when your account is settled. The medication was making everything feel distant and dreamlike, but that cut through. My passport. The one document I needed to exist in this country, to leave this country, to prove I was who I said I was. They had it, and they weren't giving it back until I paid. I was trapped. Legally, financially, physically trapped. I lay back against the pillow and closed my eyes. The pain in my leg was nothing compared to the weight settling in my chest. This wasn't an adventure anymore. This wasn't freedom. This was the moment when everything I'd built, the savings, the plan, the carefully constructed new life, started to crumble. And there was nothing I could do but watch it happen. They moved me to a private room on the 4th floor, clean white walls, a window overlooking the city, a TV mounted on the wall showing Vietnamese news I couldn't understand. The bed was comfortable. The air conditioning worked. It was nicer than my apartment in Tay Ho. It was costing me €260 a night. I lay there as the medication wore off, and the pain came back in waves, scrolling through my phone with my good hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened to my life. I texted my ex-wife Saskia. Just one line. Had an accident in Hanoi. In hospital. I'm okay. I watched the message go from delivered to read. The typing indicator appeared, then disappeared. No reply came. I put the phone face down on the bedside table and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Each exhale reminding me exactly how much broken ribs hurt, and waited for Thursday to come. Wednesday morning, I woke up to fluorescent lights and the mechanical beep of an IV pump. The pain medication had worn off during the night, and my leg was screaming. I pressed the call button, and a nurse came in, checked my chart, adjusted the IV drip. The relief took about 10 minutes to arrive, but when it did, I could think clearly enough to hate myself for being grateful. This was costing me money with every passing hour. Every dose of morphine, every bag of saline, every time a nurse checked my blood pressure. The meter was running, and I was the one paying. The doctor came in around 9. Same woman from yesterday, tablet in hand, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She pulled up a chair next to the bed. Good morning, Mr. Vanderberg. How is your pain level today? Manageable, I lied. Good. I've reviewed your scans with our orthopedic surgeon. The fracture is clean, but it requires surgical stabilization. We'll insert an intramedullary rod with screws to hold the bone in place while it heals. The surgery will take approximately 2 hours under general anesthesia. Dr. Nguyen will perform the procedure. He's very experienced. You'll be in good hands. I nodded because what else could I do? When? Tomorrow morning, Thursday at 7 a.m. You'll need to fast starting tonight at midnight, not no food or water after that. She swiped through her tablet. I've prepared a detailed cost breakdown for you. The estimate I gave you yesterday was preliminary. This is more accurate based on Dr. Nguyen's assessment. She handed me another printed sheet. I looked at the numbers. Surgery fee, 42 million dong. Anesthesia, 12 million dong. Operating room use, 8 million dong. Post-operative care, 6 million dong per day. Medications, estimated 4 million dong. Physical therapy consultations, 2 million dong each, minimum 3 sessions. Hospital room, 8 million dong per night, 7 to 10 nights recommended. I added it up in my head 3 times, hoping I was wrong. 186 million dong. Exactly what she'd said yesterday, but seeing it itemized made it worse somehow. Each line was a reminder of how completely fucked I was. This doesn't include potential complications, she added, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized years ago. If there's excessive bleeding, infection, or if recovery takes longer than expected, additional costs will apply. We'll monitor you closely to minimize those risks, but I want you to be aware. What if I don't do the surgery? Her expression didn't change. The bone won't heal properly. You'll have chronic pain, limited mobility, possibly permanent disability. I strongly recommend the surgery, Mr. Vanderberg. This is a straightforward procedure with excellent outcomes. How much have I spent so far? She checked her tablet. Including yesterday's deposit and last night's room and care, your current balance is 63 million dong. I did the math. Just over 2,000 euros. One night in this place, and I'd burn through another 400 euros. Your total estimated cost for full treatment and recovery is approximately 220 million dong, including what you've already paid. That's 7,130 euros at current exchange rates. 7,000 euros. I felt something crack inside my chest that had nothing to do with the broken ribs. That was 5 months of my old salary in Amsterdam before taxes. That was 6 months of living expenses in Hanoi. That was 15 years of saving 10% of every paycheck, skipping vacations, driving that shitty Volvo, eating lunch at my desk instead of going out with colleagues. 15 years of discipline and denial converted into 8 days in a hospital bed because some taxi driver couldn't be bothered to check his mirrors. When do I need to pay? We require full payment before discharge. You can pay in installments during your stay if that's easier, or settle the entire balance when you leave. But we cannot release you or return your passport until your account is settled in full. There it was again, the passport, my collar and leash. What if I can't pay? We work with patients to arrange payment plans in some cases. But Mr. Vanderberg, I see from your records that you paid a 50 million dong deposit by credit card yesterday. We assume you have access to funds. If you're experiencing financial difficulty, I recommend contacting your embassy. They may be able to assist with emergency funds or repatriation loans. I almost laughed. The Dutch embassy. I'd called them yesterday afternoon after the doctor left, once the medication fog cleared enough for me to remember I had options, or thought I had options. The consular officer had been polite, sympathetic even, but utterly useless. Mr. Vanderberg, we understand your situation is difficult, but we cannot intervene in disputes between private citizens and Vietnamese businesses. The hospital's collateral policy, while aggressive, is not illegal. Our recommendation is to settle your bill as quickly as possible. If you require financial assistance, you may apply for an emergency repatriation loan through our office, but approval can take 7 to 10 business days and requires significant documentation. 7 to 10 business days. I'd be here for a week minimum after surgery. By the time the loan came through, I'd have already bled my savings dry, paying the bill myself. I'll manage, I told the doctor. Good. I'll have the surgical consent forms sent up this afternoon. Please read them carefully and sign before tonight. If you have any questions, the nursing staff can call me. She stood up, smoothed her white coat, and left. Professional. Efficient. Completely detached from the financial ruin she was orchestrating with every recommendation. She probably had 20 patients like me. Foreigners without insurance, trapped in the system, paying premium prices for the privilege of speaking English to their doctors. I wondered if she felt anything about it. Probably not. It was just business. I spent the rest of Wednesday in that bed doing math I didn't want to do. My Dutch savings account held 45,000 euros when I arrived in Vietnam. Minus 8 months of rent at 800 per month. Minus food, motorbike, miscellaneous expenses, maybe another 2,000 total, 43,000 euros left, give or take. The hospital bill would take 7,000. That left me with 36,000. Except I'd lost my job. The language center had sent me an email that morning, apologetic but firm. Dear Martin, we're very sorry to hear about your accident. Unfortunately, we need someone to cover your classes immediately and cannot hold your position. We wish you a speedy recovery. Your final paycheck will be deposited by Friday. Translation, you're fired. Good luck with your broken leg. Don't expect severance. $1,200 a month gone. My rent was due in 2 weeks. 800 euros. If I stayed in Vietnam to recover, I'd burn through the 36,000 in, 3 years? 2 years if I needed ongoing medical care. And then what? Move back to Amsterdam broke and crippled at 41. Crash on my sister's couch? Beg my old firm for my job back? Every scenario ended with me worse off than when I'd started. I tried calling Saskia again. This time she answered. Martin, I got your message. What happened? I told her. The accident, the hospital, the bill, the passport situation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. That's terrible, she said finally. I'm sorry that happened to you. I just needed to tell someone. Are you asking me for money? The question landed like a punch. No, no. I have savings. I'll be fine. Because we agreed in the divorce that finances were separate. I kept the apartment, you kept your savings. I can't help you, Martin. I'm not asking you to help me. I just wanted someone to know. Another silence. You should come home. When you can travel. Amsterdam has good hospitals. You have insurance there through the government. I don't live there anymore. You never really left though, did you? You're still a Dutch citizen. You still have your residence registration. 8 months in Vietnam doesn't change that. Come home, get proper care, figure out your life. This expat fantasy isn't working. I wanted to argue, but she was right, and we both knew it. I'll think about it. Take care of yourself, Martin. She hung up. I stared at my phone. at the cracks spider-webbing across the screen, and felt more alone than I'd felt since the moment I hit the pavement on Negitam Street. Thursday morning came too early. They woke me at 5 a.m., made me shower with antibacterial soap, shaved the hair around my leg wound. The anesthesiologist came by to explain the procedure, asked about allergies, medical history, made me sign more forms. At 6:30, they wheeled me down to the surgical floor. The operating room was freezing cold and blindingly bright. Dr. Bread, Nguyen appeared in scrubs and a surgical mask, spoke to me in English with a thick accent. "Don't worry, Mr. Vanderberg. Very routine surgery. You will be fine." They transferred me to the operating table. Someone put an oxygen mask over my face. The anesthesiologist told me to count backwards from 10. I got to 7, and then nothing. I woke up in recovery with no sense of how much time had passed. My leg was bandaged and elevated, throbbing with a deep ache that the medication couldn't quite touch. A nurse checked my vitals, asked how I felt. I mumbled something. She adjusted my IV and told me the surgery went well. 2 hours exactly, no complications. They'd inserted a titanium rod and 4 screws. Dr. Duane would check on me later. I drifted in and out of sleep for hours, surfacing occasionally to find myself still in the recovery room, still tethered to machines, still trapped. They moved me back to my regular room that evening. The doctor came by around 8 p.m., checked the surgical site, seemed satisfied. The procedure was successful. The bone is properly aligned and stabilized. You'll need to keep weight off the leg for 6 weeks minimum. We'll start physical therapy in a few days to maintain range of motion. You should be able to discharge early next week if recovery continues smoothly. Early next week meant 5 more nights at 8 million dong each. 40 million dong, another 1,300 euros, plus medications, plus therapy sessions, plus whatever other charges they'd think of. I didn't ask. I just nodded and let her leave. The weekend passed in a blur of pain medication and physical therapy consultations. They made me sit up, made me use a walker to shuffle to the bathroom and back, made me do exercises that hurt so badly I wanted to scream. Every session was 2 million dong, 65 euros to have a cheerful therapist torture me for 30 minutes while telling me I was doing great. The nurses changed my bandages twice a day. I didn't ask what that cost. I didn't want to know. By Monday, I was stable enough that they started talking discharge. The doctor reviewed my chart, said I could leave Wednesday if there were no setbacks. She asked if I had somewhere to go, someone to help me. I lied and said yes. The truth was, I had no idea. My apartment had stairs. I couldn't ride a motorbike. I couldn't cook standing up. I couldn't do anything except sit and watch my savings evaporate while my leg slowly knit itself back together. Tuesday morning, the billing office called. A woman's voice, polite but firm. "Mr. Vanderberg, we need to discuss your account balance. You're scheduled to discharge tomorrow. We need to finalize payment." How much do I owe? I heard papers shuffling. Your current balance is 218 million dong. That includes all charges through today, medications, surgical fees, hospital stay, therapy sessions, and miscellaneous services. 218 million dong. I pulled up the currency converter on my phone. 7,067 euros. With the initial 50 million dong deposit that I'd paid on day 1, the total was 268 million dong. 8,687 euros. Nearly 20% of everything I'd saved in 15 years. Gone in 8 days. There are some additional charges here that weren't in the original estimate, I said, scrolling through the itemized bill they'd emailed me. CT scan interpretation fee, specialist consultation fee, international patient service fee. What are these? Standard fees for foreign patients requiring specialist care and English language medical services. The preliminary estimate covered basic surgical and hospital costs. Additional professional services are billed separately. Second, that's 28 million dong in fees that weren't disclosed up front. The preliminary estimate clearly states that actual costs may vary, Mr. Vanderberg. These charges are standard across all international hospitals in Vietnam. If you'd like to dispute them, you can file a complaint with hospital administration, but that process takes 30 to 60 days and will not delay your payment requirement. I closed my eyes. Fine, I'll pay. Will you be paying by credit card? Yes. We accept Visa and MasterCard. There is a 3% processing fee for credit card payments over 100 million dong. Of course there was. Fine. I'll send someone up to process payment tomorrow morning before discharge. Please have your card ready. Once payment is confirmed, we'll release your passport and discharge paperwork." She hung up. I lay back against the pillow and pulled up my Dutch bank app. Current balance, 43,380 euros. After this payment, 34,693 euros. I'd arrived in Vietnam 8 months ago with 45,000. I was leaving this hospital having spent over 10,000 euros on rent and living expenses and a medical bill that could have been avoided if I'd just spent 200 euros on travel insurance. The math was so obvious, it hurt worse than my leg. Wednesday morning came. A hospital administrator arrived at 8 a.m. with a card reader. I handed over my MasterCard. She swiped it. The machine took a long time to process. I watched the screen, waiting for it to be declined, waiting for the system to reject the largest transaction I'd ever made. But it went through. Approved. She handed me a receipt. 200 million dong plus 3% processing fee. 224,540 dong. 7,274 euros. Including the deposit I'd paid on day one, total spent 8,894 euros. I'd done the math wrong earlier. It was worse than I thought. "Your account is settled," the administrator said. "I'll inform the doctor. She'll complete your discharge paperwork and someone will return your passport at reception. Do you need help arranging transportation?" "No." "Do you have prescriptions to fill?" "I'll figure it out." She left. An hour later, the doctor came by with discharge instructions. Keep the wound clean and dry. No weight bearing for 6 weeks. Follow up with an orthopedic specialist in 2 weeks. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Pain medication as needed. She handed me prescriptions for antibiotics, painkillers, anti-inflammatories. She didn't mention what they'd cost. She probably assumed I'd already learned not to ask. At 10 a.m., a nurse came with a wheelchair. Hospital policy. They wheeled me down to reception. The same desk where they'd taken my passport 8 days ago. A different receptionist this time, young woman who barely looked at me. She checked my name on her computer, opened a drawer, pulled out my passport, handed it to me like it was nothing. Like this small blue book hadn't been the chain keeping me prisoner for over a week. "You're all set, Mr. Vanderbird. Take care." I took the passport. The photo inside showed a man who didn't exist anymore, smiling, confident, ready for adventure. That Martin had died on Niggy Tam Street 8 days ago. The one sitting in this wheelchair, broken and broke, was someone else entirely. The nurse wheeled me outside. The Hanoi heat hit me like a wall after 8 days in air conditioning. It was nearly November, but still 30 degrees, humid enough to make breathing feel like work. I'd called a grab car earlier. It pulled up, and the driver helped me into the back seat. The nurse handed me my crutches, wished me well, and wheeled the chair back inside. The driver asked where to in Vietnamese. I gave him my address in Tay Ho. He nodded and pulled into traffic. I watched the city pass by through the window. The same streets I'd ridden 8 days ago. The same chaos of motorbikes and street vendors and life happening at a volume that felt impossible after the quiet sterility of the hospital. We passed the spot on Ninh Khi Tam where I'd been hit. I recognized the curve, the place where the taxi had been parked. There was no evidence anything had happened there. No skid marks, no broken glass, just another Tuesday morning on a Hanoi street where accidents happen and people move on and nobody remembers except the person who got hurt. We arrived at my building. The driver helped me up the stairs, refused to tip, drove away. I stood in my apartment on crutches, leg throbbing, looking around at the space I'd called home for 8 months. It looked different now, smaller, less like freedom and more like the place where my life had fallen apart. My motorbike was somewhere in a police impound lot, totaled. My job was gone. My savings were gutted. I had 8,000 euros left in the bank minus rent due in 4 days. The math was simple and brutal. I couldn't stay. I couldn't afford to recover here. I had to go home. I sat down on my balcony and looked out at Westlake. The same view I'd loved every morning since February, the water flat and gray under November clouds. Somewhere across the city, the taxi driver who hit me was going about his life. Working, eating, sleeping, completely unaware of the destruction he'd caused. Maybe he didn't even remember it. Just another near miss in a city full of them. And I was here, broken and bankrupted, trying to figure out how to survive the aftermath of someone else's carelessness. I opened my banking app one more time. 34,693 euros. Everything I had left in the world. And it wasn't enough, not even close. I spent the first 3 days after discharge on my balcony, leg propped up on a plastic stool, watching Westlake and doing math I didn't want to do. The numbers never changed no matter how many times I ran them. 34,693 euros in the bank. Rent due Friday, 800 euros. That would leave me with 33,893, no income. Recovery time estimated at 3 months before I could walk properly, 6 months before I could ride a motorbike again. Even if I found another teaching job tomorrow, which I couldn't, my burn rate in Hanoi was at least 1,500 euros a month, including rent, food, utilities, medical follow-ups. 22 months until the money ran out. Less if anything else went wrong. And things always went wrong. I started making a list on my phone. Things I could sell. My laptop, a MacBook Pro I'd bought in Amsterdam 2 years ago, still worth maybe 600 euros. My camera, a Fujifilm I'd been using to document Vietnam, another 300. My furniture came with the apartment, so that was useless. My motorbike was totaled, but technically still mine. The frame and parts might get me 200 euros from a scrapyard. My clothes, books, kitchen stuff, all worthless. I added it up. 1,100 euros if I was lucky and found buyers who didn't smell desperation. That bought me another month. Maybe. The reality settled in slowly, like water seeping through a ceiling. I couldn't stay in Vietnam, even if I wanted to, even if I could find work that didn't require standing or riding or being mobile. The math didn't work. Every month here was a month of savings burned with nothing to show for it. But leaving meant admitting failure. It meant going back to Amsterdam broken and poor at 41. It meant my sister had been right. It meant Saskia had been right. It meant everyone who'd looked at me skeptically when I said I was moving to teach English in Hanoi, all of them shaking their heads like I was having some pathetic midlife crisis. They'd all been right, and I'd been wrong. Thursday morning, I posted my laptop on an expat Facebook group. MacBook Pro 2023. Mint condition. Selling due to medical emergency. Need quick sale. I listed it for 500 euros, knowing I'd take less. Within an hour, I had 15 messages. By afternoon, I'd sold it for 450 to an Australian guy who taught at an international school in Ko Giai. He came by Friday morning, tested it, paid cash in Vietnamese dong. 11,800,000. I converted it immediately, sent it to my Dutch account. Every bit helped. My camera went next, 300 euros to a travel blogger from Germany. My motorbike took longer. I had to hobble down to the impound lot on crutches, sign papers releasing it to a salvage dealer who offered me 150 euros for the wreck. I took it. By the end of week 2, I'd liquidated everything I owned that had value. 900 euros total. My apartment looked empty. Just a mattress, some clothes, kitchen supplies I'd leave behind. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. The physical therapy sessions were torture. 3 times a week at a clinic near my apartment. 2 million dong each session. 65 euros to have someone bend my leg in ways that made me see stars. The therapist was a young woman named Lynn, who spoke decent English and had apparently not gotten the memo that her job was supposed to include sympathy. "You need to push harder," she'd say, while I gritted my teeth and tried not to scream. "The muscle atrophy is already setting in. If you don't work now, you'll have permanent mobility issues." I knew she was right, but I hated her anyway. Hated her cheerfulness, her insistence that this was all part of healing, her oblivious certainty that everything would be fine. Nothing was fine. The prescriptions were another drain. Antibiotics, painkillers, anti-inflammatories. I'd filled them at a pharmacy near the hospital, paid 3 million dong without asking for an itemized breakdown because I didn't want to know. The painkillers ran out after 10 days. I thought about refilling them, but they cost 800,000 dong for 30 pills, 26 euros, and I was trying to make every euro last. I switched to ibuprofen from a local pharmacy, 200,000 dong for a bottle of generic pills that barely touched the pain. But at least let me pretend I was being responsible with money. I couldn't sleep. The leg ached constantly, a deep throb that the cheap painkillers couldn't reach. I'd lie on my mattress staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Hanoi at night. Motorbikes passing below, someone's karaoke party down the street, dogs barking, life happening while mine had stopped. I thought about the 15 years I'd spent building that savings account, the 60-hour weeks at the tech firm, the projects I'd managed, the code I'd written, the meetings I'd sat through trying to care about quarterly targets and shareholder value. I'd hated that job, but I'd been good at it. Good enough to make 6 figures. Good enough to save 45,000 euros over 15 years, while my friends bought houses and took vacations and lived like money was something you spent instead of hoarded. I'd told myself I was being smart, being prepared, building a safety net for the future, and now the net was full of holes and I was still falling. I tried calling my sister Emma one night around 3 a.m., my time, evening in Utrecht. She answered on the fourth ring. Martin, what's wrong? Nothing. I needed to talk to someone. It's late there, isn't it? I can't sleep. How's your leg? Healing. Slowly. I paused. I think I need to come home. Silence on the other end. Then, I think that's probably smart. I fucked up, Emma. I spent almost 9,000 euros on a hospital bill. I lost my job. I can't afford to stay here anymore. Jesus. 9,000? 8,894, if you want to be precise. That's insane. That's Vietnam without insurance. Another pause. Do you need money? For the flight? No, I can cover it. I stopped. What was I asking for? Absolution? Permission to fail? I don't know what I'm doing. I came here thinking I could start over, and I just made everything worse. You had an accident, Martin. That's not your fault. I didn't have insurance. That is my fault. Okay, yes, that was stupid. But you can't undo it now. You can only move forward. Emma had always been practical. She taught high school math in Utrecht, lived in a small apartment with her boyfriend, saved 10% of every paycheck just like our father had taught us. Responsible. Stable. Everything I'd tried to be before I threw it all away for adventure. When are you coming back? I don't know. Soon. I need to figure out the logistics. You can stay with us for a bit. The guest room is tiny, but it's yours if you need it. The offer made my throat tight. Thanks. Get some sleep, okay? Things will look better in the morning. Sure, I lied. She hung up. I lay there holding my phone, looking at the cracked screen, wondering if things would actually look better in the morning, or if that was just something people said to end uncomfortable conversations. Monday morning, I booked a flight, KLM, Hanoi to Amsterdam via Bangkok, departing in 6 days. Economy class, one way, 912 euros. The price made me physically ill, but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't stay, and I couldn't afford to wait for a cheaper flight. I needed to leave before something else went wrong, before my leg got infected, or my landlord decided to raise the rent, or the universe found some new way to kick me while I was down. I told my landlord I was breaking the lease. He was Vietnamese, mid-50s, owned several properties in Tahoe, and rented them to expats at inflated prices. He'd always been polite but distant. Now he was just annoyed. Your contract requires 30 days notice and a penalty for early termination, 1 month rent. I had a medical emergency. I'm going back to Amsterdam. I can't stay. Contract is contract. You signed it. I looked at him. This man who'd collected 800 euros from me every month for 8 months, who'd never fixed the broken air conditioner, or the leaking bathroom sink, or the cockroach problem in the kitchen, and I realized I had no fight left. Fine. Keep the deposit. The deposit was 800 euros, same as 1 month rent. Money I'd never see again, but money I couldn't fight for without staying longer and spending more. Deposit covers cleaning and damages only. You still owe 1 month penalty. I don't have it. Then you stay until you pay. We stared at each other. I understood the game. He had leverage, and he knew it. I couldn't leave the country with a debt to a landlord who knew where my passport had been issued and could theoretically cause problems if he wanted to be vindictive. Probably wouldn't, but probably wasn't good enough when you were trying to escape. I'll transfer it before I leave. Good. I accept bank transfer. I'll send details. He left without saying goodbye. Another 800 euros. My balance after the flight and the penalty, 32,181 euros. Less than I'd had when I arrived 8 months ago. All that time in Vietnam, all those mornings watching the sunrise over Westlake, all those afternoons drinking Bia Hoi and thinking I'd found something real, and I was leaving poorer than I'd come, not just in money, in everything. The last few days passed in a fog. I went to my physical therapy sessions because Lynn had terrified me with stories of permanent limp, and I was vain enough to care. I packed my 2 suitcases, same ones I'd arrived with, now fuller with clothes I'd bought and souvenirs that felt meaningless. A silk scarf I'd gotten for Emma. A ceramic bowl from Bat Trang. A photo book of Hanoi street scenes I'd printed at a shop in the old quarter, back when I thought I'd be here long enough to need memories. It all felt like artifacts from someone else's life. Wednesday afternoon, the day before my flight, I sat on my balcony one last time. The view hadn't changed. Westlake still flat and gray. The city still loud and chaotic and indifferent. Somewhere out there, the taxi driver who'd hit me was having lunch, or taking a nap, or picking up his kid from school, completely unaware that he'd destroyed someone's life. I wanted to hate him. Wanted to feel rage, righteous anger, the kind of emotion that would make sense of all this. But I just felt tired and stupid. Stupid for thinking I could escape. Stupid for not buying insurance. Stupid for believing that freedom was something you could find by getting on a plane and teaching English to bored teenagers in a country where you didn't speak the language and didn't understand the rules until they crushed you. I thought about the 45,000 euros, 15 years of saving, eating lunch at my desk, driving that Volvo until the engine started making concerning noises, saying no to friends who wanted to go to Barcelona for a weekend, staying in on Saturday nights to save money while everyone else was out living. I told myself I was being disciplined, responsible, preparing for the future. But what future? The one where I ended up 41 and divorced and desperate enough to flee to Southeast Asia. The one where a taxi driver could erase 20% of my net worth in 8 seconds. What exactly had I been saving for? The sun set over the lake. I watched it disappear behind the buildings, the sky turning orange and purple and then dark. My phone buzzed. Email from the language center. My final paycheck had been deposited. $1,200. I converted it to euros, transferred it to my Dutch account. 33,232 euros. Everything I had left. It wasn't enough for a down payment on an apartment. Wasn't enough to retire. Wasn't enough to feel secure. But it was enough to start over one more time. Maybe the last time. Thursday morning, I took a grab to Noi Bai Airport. The driver helped me with my suitcases. Wished me good luck. I checked in, went through security, found my gate. The airport was full of tourists and expats and Vietnamese families, everyone going somewhere, everyone with purpose. I sat in a plastic chair and watched them pass and felt like a ghost. The flight boarded. I hobbled onto the plane on crutches, found my seat, 32F, window. The flight attendant asked if I needed help stowing my crutches. I said no. The plane filled up. We took off. I watched Hanoi shrink below me, the Red River winding through the city, Westlake a gray smudge in the distance. 10 minutes and it was all gone, swallowed by clouds. The flight to Bangkok took 2 hours. We had a 3-hour layover. I sat in the terminal and ate a sandwich that cost 12 euros and tasted like cardboard. The flight to Amsterdam was 11 hours. I took painkillers and tried to sleep, but my leg throbbed and the seat was too narrow and the man next to me snored. I gave up and watched a movie I didn't follow. Then another. Time passed the way it does on long flights, slowly and all at once. We landed at Schiphol at 6 a.m. local time. Gray November morning, drizzle on the runway. Welcome home. I took the train to Utrecht. Emma picked me up at the station, hugged me carefully, loaded my suitcases in her car. She didn't ask how I was. She could see. The limp, the crutches. The way I moved like someone 30 years older. We drove to her apartment in silence. She helped me upstairs to the guest room. Small, like she'd warned. A single bed, a desk, a window overlooking the street. Make yourself at home, she said. We'll figure out next steps later. Next steps. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine what those looked like. Find a job. Find an apartment. Rebuild the savings. Start over. Again, at 41. I pulled up my banking app. 33,232 euros, minus the train ticket and some other expenses. 33,000 even, roughly. 2/3 of what I'd had when this all started. The number sat there on my phone screen, mocking me. I thought about Martin from February, the one who'd arrived in Hanoi with 2 suitcases and 45,000 euros and a plan to start over. He'd been naive, stupid, arrogant enough to think he could just opt out of his old life and build a new one without consequences. But at least he'd tried. At least he'd had the courage to get on that plane. The Martin lying in Emma's guest room had lost that courage somewhere between Nicky Tam Street and Vinmec Hospital. Lost it along with the money and the job and the illusion that adventure was something you could afford without insurance. A week later, I got a freelance contract at my old firm. They needed someone who knew their legacy codebase, and I needed money. The rate was decent, 60 euros an hour, enough to survive while I figured out what came next. I took it. My old colleagues were surprised to see me back. How was Asia? They'd ask over coffee in the break room. I'd smile and say expensive, and they'd laugh like I was joking. I wasn't joking. My leg healed slowly. Physical therapy in Utrecht was covered by Dutch health insurance, the kind of insurance I should have had all along but couldn't afford as a non-resident freelancer living in Vietnam. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months after the accident, I could walk without crutches. 6 months later, the limp was barely noticeable. A year later, I got a permanent position at the firm, bought a small studio apartment in Utrecht, started saving again, 10% of every paycheck, just like before. The number in my banking app climbed slowly. 35,000, 38,000, 40,000, getting closer to where I'd started but never quite reaching it. I never got back on a motorbike. Never went back to Vietnam. Some lessons you only learn once. Welcome back. That was Martin's story, submitted to Vietnamese Vixens from his current home in Utrecht. He's 43 now, works in tech, saves aggressively, and has comprehensive international health insurance he'll probably never use. The medical bills are paid. The leg mostly works. The savings account is slowly recovering. But something else broke that October morning on Anh Tam Street. Something that money can't fix and time hasn't healed. The belief that you can escape, that you can start over clean. That bad things only happen to careless people. Martin learned what thousands of expats learn every year. Usually the hard way. Vietnam is paradise. Until it isn't. Until the motorbike accident, or the dengue fever, or the bar fight, or the money runs out. And when that happens, the system doesn't care about your dreams, or your story, or how much you wanted to be free. It cares about payment. And if you can't pay, if you didn't plan for disaster, if you thought insurance was an unnecessary expense, well, you'll pay anyway. Just a lot more. Martin spent 8,894 euros and 8 days in a hospital to learn that lesson. Some people spend more. Some people never make it home. If you're watching this from somewhere without proper coverage, without a backup plan, without the humility to admit that bad things can happen to anyone, maybe this is your warning. Maybe Martin's mistake can save you from making your own. And if you've been through something similar, if you felt that moment when paradise turned into a prison and money you'd spent years saving evaporated in days, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Unfortunately, you're not even unusual. Thanks for watching Vietnamese Vixens. Hit that subscribe button if you want more cautionary tales from the expat world. And remember, whether you're in Hanoi or Bangkok or Manila or anywhere else where hospital bills can destroy your life, get insurance, not tomorrow, not next month. Today, Martin wishes he had. We'll see you in the next one.